What's up everybody, it's the River here, and today I'm going to take you through my attempt at a Pokemon Shield Hardcore Nuzlocke using only Ice types. For those of you who might not know, Hardcore Nuzlockes include extra rules to make the game more challenging. I'll leave the most important points on screen now, and a full list of the rules in the description below. If you'd like a more in-depth explanation of the rules, check out some of my earlier videos. But at this point, I will mention a rule specific to the Galar region. I will not be allowed to Dynamax my Pokemon. This is going to make gym leaders and any arena fights much more difficult. So, Ice types. Ice type Pokemon have been some of my favorites, ever since I started playing Pokemon. Some of this affection is definitely linked to the fact that prior to the introduction of the Fairy type in Generation 6, Ice types were one of the only reliable counters to a lot of late-game Dragon trainers. After successfully finishing a Water type only Nuzlocke in Shining Pearl, I wanted to try my hand at an Ice type only run. But this is usually complicated by the fact that Ice types are most abundant in the late game, similar to Steel or Dragon types. However, the wild area of the Galar region opens up a lot of opportunities for monotype runs that are usually impossible in other games without a lot of extra caveats. I've not actually played Sword or Shield through to completion yet, so in addition to being an Ice type only run, this will also be my first playthrough of Shield. I made sure to do a lot of research before and during my run, and I quickly realized this was going to be quite the challenge. The Ice type is rather offensively minded, with super effective matchups into 4 types: Flying, Grass, Ground, and of course, Dragon. However, it is also not effective into 4 types: Fire, Steel, Water, and Ice itself. And it is hit for super effective damage by 4 types: Fighting, Rock, Fire, and Steel. So we're already looking at a thematically appropriate glass cannon characteristic. To make matters worse, because of the fact that Ice types are normally late game encounters, early evolutions of Ice types are usually, well, they're just pretty bad. Their stats aren't very good, their learn sets aren't great, and there's an abundance of rock and fighting type moves that I've got to worry about. So this run could get weird. Some good news. Here are all of the Ice types available to me in the Galar region. And there are quite a few. A lot of pure Ice types, but also a few with useful dual typings to help cover my weaknesses. Darmanitan is a Sword exclusive, so I won't be able to pick one up, and Arctozold and Arctovish are fossil Pokemon, so I'll only be able to get one of them, and that will also rely on my luck with the Digging Duo. So, with that massive introduction out of the way, let's get into my attempt at a Pokemon Shield Hardcore Nuzlocke using only Ice types. Here's how it went. The game begins with me meeting up with my neighbor and future rival, Hop. He and I have to go find his brother, the reigning champion, to make sure he doesn't get lost on the 1-block stretch from the train station to his own house. Condescension aside, Leon seems like a pretty cool dude, and he's brought us 3 starter Pokemon to choose from. None of these guys evolve into an Ice type, so my decision here is mostly to determine which Pokemon Hop ends up using. I picked the Water type Sobble, and because this is a later gen Pokemon game, that means Hop takes the Fire type Scorbunny, which would be super effective into our eventual team of Ice types. This does mean that Leon takes Grookey, so the champion fight will be a bit easier for me, but I reasoned that he's already got a Charizard for his ace, so that should even things out. I'll skip the first rival battle because I don't have an Ice type yet, and there's actually quite a lot of cutscenes and plot stuff right at the beginning of the game. It's getting to be kind of tedious, and I'm remembering a lot of the criticisms that people had when these games first came out. But eventually, we make it to the professor's house, and I should play this game more. After another rival battle and getting a Wishing Star for Dynamaxing, which I'll only ever use for raid dens, we finally make it to the calling card for the Galar region that I don't think is kind of silly. The wild area is Pokemon's first attempt at a mini open-world type game with overworld sprites for Pokemon who wander around. There's a huge variety of Pokemon encounters here, and I'll be able to get a bunch of Ice types by adjusting the time and date settings on my Switch to cycle through weather patterns. I'll be considering each labeled region of the wild area as its own route for eligible encounters, but in order to avoid filling out my entire party right at the start of the game, I'm going to limit myself to 3 encounters before the first gym. After that point, I'm only allowed another encounter once I finish off a gym leader. The first three I pick up are a Snorunt from North Lake Mylock, a Vanillite from South Lake Mylock, and a Snover from Watchtower Ruins. All of their abilities sync up super well for a Hail team, and this is going to carry me through most of the early game. I also make sure to pick up the Leftovers item from the Giant Seat, which coupled with the Ice Body ability in Hail is going to be a lot of healing for my team. With my party of Ice types finally ready to get going, I'm feeling good about starting the gym challenge, so naturally this means another rival battle with Hop, which I'll actually show this time. He leads with Wooloo, and I start with Thanks the Snover, who can set up Hail with his Snow Warning ability. Wooloo hits a tackle for minimal damage, as a Powder Snow and Hail damage do about half of his health. Hop then switches to using Growl, as the next rotation of Powder Snow and Hail doesn't quite do enough damage to take out Wooloo. Thankfully, Hop doesn't heal with a potion, so another Growl and Powder Snow exchange takes out Wooloo. Hop immediately sends out Scorbunny, and I'm kinda scared. I swap into Chili, the Snorunt, who's my bulkiest Pokemon at this point, as Hop just goes for a tackle. I'm not sure if this is just the AI being nice to me, or it's purposefully programmed to be kinda dumb for this point in the game, but Ice Body and Leftovers heal most of the damage as Scorbunny takes chip damage from Hail. Quick Attack from Scorbunny does a bit of damage as I use Astonish, but the Hail stops, so I risk switching back into Thanks to set it up again. Thankfully, Hop keeps up with the quick attacks, so I survive and switch back to Chili. Hop finally decides to use super effective Ember, which does about half of Chili's health. Ember does another big chunk of damage on the next turn, and of course it gets the burn as well. Burn halves my attack, but I had already decided to use Leer instead of another attack, so Scorbunny's defense drops. I switch into Snowcone the Vanillite, who's actually got a decent special defensive stat, so Ember doesn't even trigger the Oran Berry as I heal with a Ice Body. Perhaps because of the high special defense, Hop goes for a tackle on the next turn, which brings Snowcone into Oran Berry range. Astonish does a bit more damage as the Hail ends. I switch back to Thanks, because I really need that chip damage from Hail as Hop goes for another tackle, so thank God for no 4x effective Ember. Snowcone is back out and tanks another tackle, but finally, on the next turn, Snowcone gets a crit Astonish, which takes out Scorbunny. Rookidee is out last, and after taking a pick, super effective Icy Wind with Hail damage takes it out in one turn. Okay, so I know this was super tedious, but I wanted to at least show the first real rival fight in detail. Relying on chip damage from Hail isn't the most exciting gameplay out there, but it's all I've got until I get some stronger moves, and this is how most of my early game trainer battles went. I will be skipping over most of the other rival battles in this playthrough just because there are so many of them. I'll touch on Hops a little bit because he's got the Fire-type Cinderace, but I'll ignore most of the Marnie and Bead fights until we get to the semifinals. On the other end of the Galar Mine, I actually get my next encounter in the form of an Eevee, who I name Let's Go, because this is the closest I'm ever going to get to playing those games. I'll be able to evolve him into a Glaceon with an Ice Stone later, but for now, he's moral support. With that lengthy prologue out of the way, it's time for the first gym leader, Milo. He's a Grass-type trainer, so I'll have the type advantage, but it's also going to be my first brush with a Dynamax Pokemon. I lead Snowcone into his Gossifleur, and after taking some damage from Round, Avalanche is able to get the one-shot. Eldegoss is up next, so I go for a Protect to stall out 3 Dynamax turns. Protect won't fully block a Dynamax move, but it still helps tank the damage. I swap to Thanks on the next turn, who not only sets up more Hail, but his part Grass typing helps him tank a full hit from a max Overgrowth. I use Protect to tank the last Dynamax turn, and with the Leftovers item, Thanks has remained reasonably healthy. I use Priority Ice Shard on the next turn, but even without the Dynamax, it does much less damage than I expected. I use Protect to stall for some more grassy terrain and Leftovers healing as Eldegoss goes for a Round, and then I use Leer to lower his defense. I swap into Chili, who takes damage from Magical Leaf, and then immediately back into Thanks to set up Hail again. I use Protect for some more damage with Hail and some healing from leftovers, and then an Ice Shard on the next turn does a good amount of damage thanks to the lowered defenses from Leer. One more Ice Shard on the next turn gets me the kill. But honestly, I did not expect the first gym to give me this much of a challenge when I even had the type advantage. With the first gym out of the way, I go back to the wild area for another encounter, and I find the reincarnation of my Mamoswine from my Soul Silver run, and Nubby joins the team again. Nubby is already going to play an important role, because Hop's waiting for me on the bridge to the next city, and he's already evolved his Scorbunny while my whole team is waddling around in their initial stage of evolution. I know I won't be relying on Nubby for the upcoming Water-type gym, so I level her up all the way to the cap of 24 and teach her Earthquake with the TR from the wild area in order to help deal with Hop's Rabbit. I expect this fight to end with a sack for a clean switch into Nubby, but for some reason Hop refuses to use his Flame Charge, so I end up just tanking a double kick and killing with an Earthquake, so that's another uneventful rival battle. Up next is the second gym leader fight with Nessa, and man, I really should have played these games sooner. Jokes aside, I'm feeling good about this gym, because while farming in the wild area, I found the Seed Bomb TR for Thanks, so he's got a really powerful move at his disposal. Seed Bomb and Hail damage take out Goldeen on the first turn, and Arrokuda on the next as Leftovers heals back some damage. Dreadnought is up last, and is 4 times weak to grass, but I've still got to survive his Dynamax turns. I protect with Thanks to tank a Max Strike on the first turn, before swapping into Chili, who is able to tank a full Max Strike and even protect to live the Max Geyser. After that, I switch back to Thanks, who can tank a Razor Shell, but as usual, I use Protect on the next turn for some extra Leftovers healing. Dreadnought nearly kills with a Headbutt on the next turn, and thankfully doesn't get the flinch chance, so one more Seed Bomb finishes off the weakened Dreadnought, and that's badge number 2. There's some plot stuff with the chairman and another battle with Bede, which I'll skip, and then after chasing off some Team Yell Grunts in the second Galar Mine, we find Kabu so that we can progress with the gym challenge. And I'm terrified. Kabu is the third gym leader, who is notorious both in-game and IRL for being a strong opponent and a roadblock for normal players, let alone anyone foolish enough to try running a full ice team into the fire gym. However, my saving grace was the next possible encounter I had in the wild area, which was a Shelder that I fished up on East Lake Axwell. Now, I've ignored Shelder in the past and assumed that it was just a worse version of Lapras or Dugong, but this little guy is going to be the only reason that this next gym is possible for me. I evolved Let's Go into a Glaceon using an Ice Stone, and more importantly, I evolved Savior the Shelder into a Cloyster with a Water Stone. Savior has a perfect attack boosting nature and the Skill Link ability, which makes moves like Icicle Spear and Rock Blast always hit 5 times. Cloyster is also a Stone evolution, which can sometimes mean bad learn sets, but the Galar region has a free move reminder in every Pokemon Center, so I have access to Cloyster's entire arsenal of moves right away. Oh yeah, and there's a fight with Marnie, but she's a lot stronger later in the game, so we'll skip this. Let's get into the fight with Kabu. He leads with Ninetales as I send out Savior. His Ninetales initially outspeeds and hits an Ember for about a third of my health, but then I use Shell Smash. This lowers my defense and special defense while doubling my attack, special attack, and speed. This boost to attack and speed, along with Skill Link Rock Blast, means that Savior is able to sweep Kabu's entire team. Kabu even Gigantamaxes his Centiskorch, but the bug and fire typing means he's 4 times weak to rock, so Savior still kills it in one shot. Really living up to his name and making what could have been the hardest gym in the run a total cakewalk. With the first 3 gyms out of the way, more of the wild area is accessible, and as we head to the next city, I pick up another encounter, a Sneasel from the Motostoke Riverbank who I name Apollo, because he kinda reminds me of my friend's cat. On our way out of Hammerlock, Hop has been feeling not the best after losing to Bede, which doesn't feel like it should be possible, but this is the same AI that refused to use a Fire-type move against my Grass and Ice-type Snover. Something about being depressed that he's bringing down his brother's reputation because as a trainer who started out a week ago, he isn't living up to the name of an unbeatable champion. Yeah, let's work on some more realistic expectations. Keep it light, Nintendo, come on. Hop needs a bit of a pick-me-up, so before the next gym battle, he challenges me to another battle. And like the good friend that I am, I destroy his whole team with a Shell Smash sweep. I work through the gym mission for Still One Side, and during my final preparations, Nubby evolves into a Piloswine. I immediately run to the move Reminder to teach her Ancient Power, so on the next level she reaches her final form as a Mamoswine. Welcome back, old friend. Now let's fight Alistair, the Ghost Gym Leader. Apollo the Sneasel is a strong option here, but I've also got a Shell Smashing Clayster. Shell Smash on turn 1 lowers my defenses, so I'm a bit worried about the incoming attack from Yamask, but it just goes for Disable. I use Ice Beam to avoid triggering the Wandering Spirit ability on Yamask, and then Icicle Spear is the perfect answer for both Cursula's weak armor ability and Mimikyu's disguise ability. Losing Skill Link here because of the Wandering Spirit ability would have definitely complicated things. However, I won't be able to take out Gengar until after it finishes Gigantamaxing, so I use Protect to block a max ooze, but it still does a decent chunk and grants a special attack boost. I swap into Chili, who actually survives a max darkness, but unfortunately he is just here for the sack, so on the next turn he dies to a G-Max Terror, even through a Protect. First death of the run, and quite frankly I'm surprised it took this long. I'm not too worried about missing out on Glalie. Might have been a different story if this was a female with the potential for Frostlass. But now that the Gigantamax is done, Gengar doesn't have the Levitate ability, so after hitting hard with a Hex, Nubby takes down Gengar with an Earthquake, and that's the 4th gym taken care of. And Team Death number 1. Thank you for your service, Chili. I take a quick stroll through the forest in order to find the next city, and I gotta say, I've been enjoying these sweeping shots over each city whenever I find them for the first time. The next gym is the thematically appropriate Fairy-type gym, and this has a reputation for being pretty easy because of the question mechanic throughout the battle. I don't have any strong Steel or Poison-type attackers, so I lead with Nubby for raw power. Galarian Weezing is up first, and has the Levitate ability, so I can't hit it with super effective Earthquake. Instead, I opt for Ice Beam, which does about half health. She retaliates with the Fairy Wind, but it doesn't do much. Opal then starts asking us questions, and the correct answers give us significant stat boosts. The first question raises our speed, which wasn't really necessary, but Weezing barely survives another Ice Beam, so Nubby has to tank another Fairy Wind. I recover some health with Shell Bell as Ice Beam kills on the next turn, but it's still more damage than I expected to take at this point. Mawile is up next and has the Intimidate ability, but Nubby is oblivious, so her attack doesn't fall. Earthquake on the next turn gets the one-shot, and some more healing from Shell Bell as Togekiss comes out. Another correct answer boosts Nubby's defensive stats, and Ice Beam does a bit less than half. Togekiss hits back with Air Slash for good damage, but a priority Ice Shard on the next turn crits and gets the kill. Opal's last Pokemon is a Gigantamax Alcremie, and I realized that I forgot to swap out Ancient Power for Protect. However, Earthquake on the first turn does good damage, and the defense boosts let us tank a G-Max Finale pretty well. We trade blows on the next turn as well, but then Opal asks her last question, which means Nubby gets an attack boost, and one more Earthquake finishes off the battle. I have to head back to Hammerlock, so I escort Opal back to the city, where I inadvertently become an accessory to a crime as Opal spots Speed and instantly decides that he should be the next gym leader, and low-key abducts him. Again, jokes aside, I thought this was kind of a sweet moment, as Bede is able to get guidance from an adult who actually seems to care about him. There's another rival battle with Hop on Route 7, and I actually like how some members of his team keep rotating in and out of his party. This battle was actually kinda difficult, but I won't go into too much detail because there's still a lot of battles to get through. Savior and Nubby were MVPs thanks to their dual typings, and Hop's fully evolved Cinderace was kinda terrifying now that he finally is using his Fire-type Pyro Ball move. Oddly enough though, I actually had the most difficulty with his Snorlax, which I took down in large part due to hail damage. With that out of the way, I finally make it to the snowy regions of Galar, and I pick up my next encounter, a Snom, who I name Nom, on Route 8. It's actually over the level cap, so I can't use it yet, especially because I'll need to evolve it before it's useful. Speaking of helpful evolutions though, some last minute grinding means that Thanks has finally reached his final form as Nobomasnow, and his name finally makes sense, even if it's an outdated meme. But now it's time for Melanie, who I respect as a fellow Ice-only trainer, and also because the character design in this generation is pretty great. She leads with Frostmoth, and I send out Xavier. I can't risk a Shell Smash because I'm lacking special defense, but 4 times effective Rock Blast takes out Frostmoth, who's pretty frail. Darmanitan is next, and does outspeed, but just goes for a taunt, so I get another kill with Rock Blast without taking any damage. However, I was hoping to use Ice-Q as an opportunity to set up, but with the taunt up, I just go for another Rock Blast and hope for the kill. Ice-Q's Ice Face ability gets triggered with the first hit, but it looks like I really needed all 5 for the kill, because Ice-Q survives. To make matters worse, Freeze Dry does a massive amount of damage with a crit, and Ice-Q's no Ice Face means she'll definitely outspeed, so I need to swap. I bring in Nubby, who tanks a Freeze Dry reasonably well and heals with leftovers. Ice-Q then uses Hail, which brings back its Ice Face, so my Body Press does no damage. Another Freeze Dry brings Nubby down to about half health before I can finally take out the Penguin with a Body Press. Things have been more difficult than I expected, and now I have to deal with a G-Max Lapras. I don't want to leave Nubby in to tank a super effective Dynamax move, even through a Protect, so I send in Let's Go, who has good special defense. G-Max Resonance doesn't do much damage, and sets up Aurora Veil for Lapras, and G-Max Geyser on the next turn sets up the Rain. Let's Go has been tanking hits pretty well, so I stay in and go for a Freeze Dry, but I forgot about the boost to Water-type moves from the Rain, so Let's Go gets taken out by another G-Max Geyser. Guess I'm definitely not playing those games now. I send in Thanks and scout the AI's move with a Protect, as Lapras uses Ice Beam. But on the next turn I get hit with a Sing which actually lands. I prepared for this with a Lumberry, but Seed Bomb doesn't do much damage through the Aurora Veil. I was feeling good as the Aurora Veil ended, but of course, Lapras then lands a crit Ice Beam for big damage, and Seed Bomb only brings it to the red. I swap an Apollo, expecting Melanie to heal, but it goes for another Ice Beam, which doesn't do much damage. I can finally outspeed, so Apollo hits a Brick Break, and Lapras goes down, winning me the next gym badge and establishing my dominance as the better Ice-type trainer. But you know, what good Ice trainer doesn't have a Lapras of their own? After sweeping through Hop's team once again, where I even had permanent Hail as a home field advantage, I get the Rotom Bike upgrade and proper access to Route 9. This means I can choose between a Bergmite and Lapras as my encounter, and I am determined to fish myself a Lapras. There are quite a few Wandering Lapras available on other routes, but they're all at such a high level that I wouldn't be able to use them in many battles. So I decided to listen to my nostalgia and try my odds at the 1% encounter rate. How long could it take, right? Well, I am not exaggerating when I tell you that, judging by the save timer, this took me 5 hours. I don't know why it took this long, and I was completely convinced I was doing something wrong, but eventually, after 5 hours of fishing, I found myself my very own Lapras, and named it Worth It, because apparently I don't know what the sunk cost fallacy is. Anyway, after finally catching Lapras, I'm in the mood for some more accessible encounters, so I head back to the wild area and am far more productive. I first use my next encounter to find a Cubchoo. I name her Artemis because she reminds me of my friend's other cat. And then I find some pretty important items. I can now find a Razor Claw at the Lake of Outrage with the Water Bike. This will be for evolving Apollo later. And I actually get really lucky by getting a fossilized dino from the Digging Duo. I can use this to resurrect Arctovish on Route 6, but I'll hold off until I really need it, just in case I find an Arctozolt instead. The electric type could be pretty useful. I made a lot of curry with Nom until she's friendly enough to evolve into a Frostmoth, and not long after, Apollo evolves into a Weavile. 2 very hard-hitting evolutions with some interesting movesets. With that, my team is officially upgraded, as Worth It the Lapras joins me for the battle with Piers. Piers' city doesn't seem to have the infrastructure for a Dynamaxing stadium, which seems kind of depressing that the Galar region won't support them, but it does mean that I don't have to jump through hoops to avoid a gym leader's Dynamax. I lead with Nom into Scrafty, and as a special attacker, she's not really concerned by Scrafty's Intimidate attack drop. I use Protect on the first turn to avoid the fake out, and on the next turn, Nom tanks a Brick Break for about half health, before getting the kill with a Pixie Plate boosted Dazzling Gleam for 4 times effective damage. Malamar is out next, so I swap into Savior, who gets hit with a crit from Psycho Cut, which does about 40 damage. Foul Play then brings Savior down to the yellow, but he retaliates with a Silver Powder boosted Pen Missile, also for 4 times effective damage, that destroys Malamar. Piers then sends in his ace, Obstagoon, and Savior is already low, so I swap to Apollo, who tanks a Throat Chop pretty well. I then respond with a Choice Band, 4 times effective Brick Break, but it doesn't get the one-shot, and I start to freak out, because I'm sure Piers will respond with a counter, but instead he goes for another Throat Chop. He uses Obstruct to stall for a turn, but soon Apollo lands another Brick Break for the kill. I'm surprised Piers didn't even try to use a potion either. His final Pokemon is Skuntank, but Nubby just destroys it with an Earthquake, and that's badge number 7. With only a minor heart attack from when Apollo was inches away from death. Now I have to prepare for the final gym and the Dragon Trainer Raihan. On paper, this should be really easy. Ice types were the original counter to dragons, but Raihan has more of a weather team than a dragon team, and the double battle format is gonna complicate things a bit. I devised a strategy to try and single out his G-Max Duraludon, because I really don't have to worry about other Pokemon getting in attacks when I'm tanking G-Max moves. Raihan leads with Flygon and Gigalith, who sets up a Sandstorm as I send Savior and Nubby. Nubby uses Priority Ice Shard with a Muscle Band to immediately one-shot the Flygon, and I set up with Iron Defense on Savior. This pays off right away as Gigalith lands a Body Press for only a bit of damage. Sandaconda comes out next, and I use Protect on Savior while I Earthquake with Nubby to hit both of Raihan's Pokemon. Sandaconda then lands a Glare to paralyze Nubby, and Gigalith sets up a Stealth Rocks, which is pretty bad news for my Ice team. Savior lands an Icicle Spear to kill Sandaconda, and I go for an Ice Beam on Gigalith with Nubby, hoping to avoid dealing with his massive defenses. But it doesn't get the kill. Fortunately, it does get the freeze chance, so Gigalith can't get it off an attack. Now it's time for Duraludon, so I use Protect with Savior as I swap Nubby into Thanks, who sets up Hail. Duraludon uses a Max Knuckle and unfortunately targets Thanks instead of Savior, but he lives in the yellow as Raihan's team gets an attack boost. Gigalith unfreezes and goes for a Body Press, but fortunately targets Savior, who is protected, and Gigalith goes down to hail damage. I swap Thanks into Snowcone, which has since evolved into a Vanillish, but he's just here for a sack and gets promptly annihilated by a Max Steel Spike, which also boosts Duraludon's defenses. Untouched this turn, Savior gets off another Iron Defense, so he's now at +4. Worth It the Lapras comes in next, and I go for a double Protect to stall the last turn of Dynamax as Duraludon uses a Max Rockfall, which doesn't do much damage to Savior, but sets up another Sandstorm. Duraludon then uses Stone Edge on Savior, which still doesn't do much damage thanks to the defense boosts, and I retaliate with an Icicle Spear which only does about a third. Worth It is playing a supportive role for this battle and sets up Hail so that I don't have to worry about chip damage. I continue this plan on the next turn, but I get greedy and have Worth It go for a Life Dew for some recovery, not thinking about the fact that Duraludon is at +1 attack thanks to the Max Knuckle, so Worth It gets killed by a Stone Edge. That is 5 hours of fishing down the drain for a very stupid mistake. Apollo comes out and can outspeed with Brick Break for the kill, so Duraludon gets taken out and I defeat Raihan before he can murder anyone else on my team. I'm honestly still kicking myself over this one because I really should have been able to make it out of this battle with Lapras alive, but I made a careless mistake and really paid for it. Worth It's name at this point is just a self-inflicted taunt, but I'm still glad I got to use Lapras even in such a limited capacity. Anyhow, it's now time for the Elite Four, and I say that with big quotation marks because the Galar region operates differently. The Champion Cup functions much closer to what I remember of the anime series, so it continues with the tournament matches serving as the endgame battles. This also means that the level cap is a bit weird. I set it to 55 to match Raihan's Duraludon again, but I'm going into the fights with Hop and Marnie a bit over-leveled since their power level is close to the first Raihan fight. I avoid any additional grinding and do my best to keep my levels down, but there are a few mandatory trainer fights on Route 10, and I even catch myself a Galarian Mr. Mime. Another point of difference with the Champion Cup is that I'll be able to reshape my team at different intervals because a bunch of plot stuff happens throughout. So I first build up my team with Marnie and Hop in mind, by making some last minute additions in the form of Arctovish, who I resurrect to replace Lapras, and Mr. Rhyme, the evolution of Galarian Mr. Mime, who I think is supposed to be based on Charlie Chaplin. It's time for the semi-final matches, and I'm feeling good about the fight with Marnie. She's been basically the third rival for the whole game, and I kinda wish she had more of a spotlight over Bede. Not only because she's pretty cute, and her theme song is a banger, but I think it could have been an interesting point of contrast with Hop, as they both try to deal with living up to the expectations of their older siblings. Anyway, the fight itself is pretty straightforward. Weavile X-Scissor takes out Liepard, Mr. Rhyme Dazzling Gleam takes out Scrafty, and Nubby Earthquakes both Toxicroak and Morpeko. The G-Max Grimmsnarl was scary, but after protecting on the first turn, Earthquake almost one-shots it because of an attack boost from Toxicroak's Swagger, so Marnie actually has to use her last turn of Dynamax to heal with a full restore. Nubby was hit by a G-Max Snooze, so I swap into Savior, but Marnie only goes for Bulk Ups and Torment, so after an Icicle Spear and Pin Missile, Savior takes out Marnie, and that's the first semi-final match done. Up next is Hop, and I was actually pretty worried about this match. Cinderace has been kind of an issue for me in the past, and this time Hop will Dynamax it as well. I begin my plan to deal with Cinderace immediately, as I lead with Savior, who can set up 2 layers of Toxic Spikes. Dubwool and Savior are both pretty tanky, so neither does much damage to each other, but I keep stalling with Protect for Leftovers Recovery, so by the time I take out Dubwool, Savior is still pretty healthy. Hop then sends in Snorlax, which threw me off because I was expecting Pincurchin. I use Protect on the first turn to start ramping up the poison damage, and then I swap into Nubby so that Savior can stay healthy for later. Snorlax goes for a Hammer Arm on the switch, but luckily he misses, so the switch is free. I stall with Protect for more poison damage, and then on the next turn an Earthquake does big damage as Snorlax then lands a Hammer Arm, but goes down to the toxic damage. Corviknight is next, so I swap to Savior for his defensiveness, and he only gets hit with a Scary Face on the switch. We trade a Drill Peck for an Icicle Spear, and I throw in a Protect for Leftovers Healing. And then Corviknight hits a Swagger, so I hit myself in confusion. I decide that I'm healthy enough to risk another confusion hit, and after a Drill Peck, I actually immediately break through the confusion, so one more Icicle Spear gets the kill. Pincurchin is finally out, but I actually outspeed, so after a turn of Protecting for more recovery, +2 Icicle Spear can get the kill pretty easily. Now it's time for Cinderace, and the Toxic Spites will be able to ramp up damage throughout his Dynamax turns, but I still need to survive until they end. Savior can tank the first hit with Protect, but then I need to switch to backup the Arctovish for the next couple of hits. The downside of swapping through my Water-Ice types is that Hot went for Max Knuckle for all 3 turns, which means that Cinderace is sitting at +3 attack. Cinderace was strong to begin with and is pretty darn fast, so I decide that I need a sack. Mr. Rhyme gets nominated as least likely to be important later, so he gets sent in and is immediately destroyed by a Pyro Ball. Sorry, Charlie. This does mean that I get a free switch into Apollo, who can outspeed and kill with a Throat Chop. This does make it seem like sacking Mr. Rhyme was pointless, because I do have a Focus Sash on Apollo, but I wasn't sure if he would actually outspeed Cinderace, because he does have a minus speed nature. I'm not sure if Hop has his Pokemon EV trained, and I'm not ruling out the possibility that I only outsped because Cinderace was setting up a counter, so I'm still going to call that a necessary sacrifice. There's a bunch of plot stuff that interweaves itself with the Champion Cup battles, so I'll kind of gloss over the details and focus on the battles themselves. Leon's gone missing or something, so Hop and I track down Oleana to the top of a tower and we get into a fight. I lead Apollo into her Frostlass, who can throat chop it in one shot. Salazzle is next, but Apollo actually has pretty great special defense, so I stay in and go for a dig. Salazzle outspeeds but only hits a poison gas, so once the dig lands the next turn, she gets taken out. Milotic comes out next, so I respond with Thanks, who has a light clay to boost the Aurora Veil turns. It takes a while to take down Milotic because of her recovers, but with enough seed bombs, I manage to get the kill. Serena is next, and can outspeed with an acrobatics for big damage. And even though the hail stopped, I land the blizzard, which leaves her with a sliver. I swap back into Apollo, who tanks another acrobatics, and then the affection mechanic kicks in to heal him of the poison. Ice Punch finishes off to Serena on the next turn, and Oleana brings out her ace, a G-Max Garbodor. I protect with Apollo on the first turn, as she sets up Sandstorm with Max Rockfall, and then swap in Cloyster to tank 2 more Max Rockfalls, the second of which is protected. When the G-Max turns end, I swap into Mamoswine, who can kill with an Earthquake after Garbodor only sets up some Poison Spikes. Oleana gets taken care of, and now it's back to the regularly scheduled matches. Kind of, because Bede interrupts us and wants one more rematch with his revamped team of Fairy types. I lead with Nubby, who is oblivious to Mawile's Intimidate, and with a Choice Band attached, uses Earthquake to kill Mawile, Gardevoir, and Galarian Rapidash. Hatterene comes out last, and I can't use Protect because of the Choice Band, so I swap into Arctovish, who tanks a Max Flare for about half health, and then protects through a Max Mindstorm. I swap to Apollo, who is immune to the next Max Mindstorm, and Poison Jab then leaves Hatterene with only a sliver of health after the Dynamax turns end. Apollo then has to tank a Dazzling Gleam, but survives thanks to his Assault Vest. Bede heals with a full restore to stall, but 2 more Poison Jabs get the kill. So Bede gets defeated, and now it's time for some rematches with gym leaders. Up first is Nessa, and her team looks a lot more impressive as she leads with a Golisopod. I send in Savior and use Protect to block the first impression, but she just goes for a Swords Dance. I still outspeed, so I go for a Rock Blast, which misses, so I get hit with a +2 Shadow Claw, which still doesn't do that much damage, but that's what I get for being greedy and giving Saviors the Leftovers item instead of a Wide Lens. Rock Blast does land on the next turn, bringing Golisopod to the yellow and triggering its Emergency Exit ability. Seaking is next, and as a physical attacker, I see an opportunity to set up. I get 2 layers of Toxic Spikes, while Seaking only sets up an Aqua Ring and barely does any damage with Mega Horn. 2 more volleys of Rock Blast, and Seaking goes down. Golisopod is back out, so I protect the first impression, and just go for a perfect accuracy Icicle Spear. Nessa, however, uses a full restore, but this ends up working in my favor, because the Icicle Spear doesn't trigger Emergency Exit, and a Rock Blast on the next turn gets the kill. Barraskewda is next, and goes for a Drill Run, as I actually miss another Rock Blast. I protect for some Leftovers recovery and poison damage, and on the next turn I tank another Drill Run before killing with a Rock Blast and another tick of toxic damage. Pelipper is next, and now I'm worried because it's actually a special attacker rather than physical, so of course I miss another Rock Blast as Nessa sets up a Tailwind. I use Protect again for some recovery, but mainly to stall a turn of Tailwind. Pelipper misses an Air Slash thanks to the Friendship mechanic, and Savior finally lands a Rock Blast, but it leaves Pelipper with a sliver. I thought Nessa would heal with another full restore, but she just goes for a Roost. This does eliminate the weakness to Rock, so Rock Blast doesn't kill, but the Tailwind peters out, so I outspeed and kill with an Icicle Spear on the next turn. Now it's time for G-Max Dreadnought, and Savior is at full health thanks to all the Leftovers recovery, so I'm feeling good. Protect on the first turn tanks a Max Rockfall that does a bit more damage than I expected and sets up a Sandstorm. I double check the damage calculations here, and Savior should live another Max Rockfall, so I stay in and go for a Protect, just in case, but it still fails. And Savior lives, with only 4 HP, and like an idiot, I forgot that the sandstorm damage would kick in before leftovers, so I let my savior die to the weather. I'm super bummed that I screwed up the damage calculations, but part of my decision was that Savior had the highest defense, so I wasn't sure if anyone else on my team would survive a full Dynamax move except for him. Nubby comes out to protect the last Dynamax move, and I've got enough chip damage from poison that an Earthquake on the next turn avenges my Savior. Alistair the Ghost Trainer is up next. And this little ghost boy was in the wrong place at the wrong time, because Apollo was pissed and out looking for blood. With a choice band to boost his attack, Apollo outspeeds to land a stab super effective throat chop that one-shots Alistair's entire team, including his G-Max Gengar. Didn't even stand a chance. The last match of the Champion Cup is a rematch with Raihan and his Weather team, but with a single battle format, I think I'll have the advantage. A choice band on Nubby means Earthquake one-shots even the tank that is Torkoal, and can also one-shot Turtonator before his Shell Trap can trigger. Goodra is out next, so I swap into Nom, and as I suspected, I get a free switch as Goodra sets up with a Rain Dance. Rain boosted Muddy Water does decent damage to Nom, but I set up with a Quiver Dance that raises special attack, special defense, and speed. I outspeed and go for an Ice Beam, which unfortunately doesn't get the kill because Goodra is so tanky, but I was mainly looking for the recovery from Shell Bell. Rain boosted Surf still does good damage, and Raihan heals with a full restore on the next turn, but my Ice Beam high rolls, so Nom one-shots the Goodra. Up next is Flygon, who is 4 times weak to Ice, so I'm not worried, but he actually still outspeeds and sets up a Sandstorm, so I probably should have double-checked the speed calculations and gone for another Quiver Dance while fighting Goodra. Regardless, Duraludon is out next, and his G-Max is still terrifying. I use Protect with Nom, which was probably dumb because she's 4 times weak to Rock, and Max Rockfall nearly kills her even through the Protect. She nearly dies to the Sandstorm damage as well. I immediately switch into Backup, who gets hit with a Max Steel Spike, but can mostly ignore the damage from Sandstorm thanks to the leftovers. A Protect on the next turn stalls out the last Dynamax move, but now I am in a predicament. With the +1 defense from Max Steel Spike, Duraludon's Body Press can 1 or 2-shot anyone on my team, so I won't be able to get a good switch in. I decide to first switch in Thanks, so that I don't have to deal with Sandstorm, and he takes big damage from Body Press. I use Protect on the next turn for some extra chip damage from Hail, but now it's time for a sack. I switch to Artemis, who I had brought in for moral support, and a Body Press brings the bear down to 1 HP. She held on to the friendship mechanic, which did surprise me, because I didn't think she spent that much time on my team. So that's pretty sweet. But I still need the switch, so I stay in and she dies to Body Press on the next turn. With that, Nubby comes out and I'm surprised when she actually outspeeds, and the Choice Band Earthquake gets the kill. So that's the finals all taken care of, but before I can face Leon, I have to fight Chairman Rose because plot. However, as I was researching Rose's team, I realized a couple of things. One, I am severely ill-equipped to deal with a team of Steel types. Steel is super effective into Ice types and also resists Ice type moves. It is vulnerable to Fire type moves, but literally none of my team can learn any. My only saving grace is that his whole team is made of physical attackers. But I can't even exploit that anymore because my savior the Cloyster is dead, taking his ridiculously high defensive stats with him. But his highest level Pokemon is above the Champion Cup level cap of 55. So with that, I bump up the level cap to that of the Champion Fight, which is 65, and that means I can actually get access to an encounter I thought would remain invalid because of its high level. I find myself a Bergmite at the Lake of Outrage, and once I evolve my second savior into an Avalugg, I have access to a tank that is even more defensive than Cloyster, and has a moveset that exploits the crap out of that massive defense. The move Body Press is a fighting type move that is unique in that its power scales off of the defense stat instead of the attack stat. So if you had, say, an Avalugg with 250 defense, who can also learn Iron Defense, you've got yourself a pretty broken Pokemon. I stroll up to the fight with Rose, and just like my first savior, Second Savior turns a fight that could have been impossible into an absolute cakewalk. 3 Iron defenses get Avalugg to +6 defense, and Avalugg can even learn the move Recover. So after he's back at full health, Second Savior uses Body Press to one-shot Rose's entire team, including his G-Max Copperajah. That takes care of Rose, but I still have to fight Eternatus. I send in backup with an Assault Vest to deal with his special moves. Eternatus hits decently hard with Dynamax Cannon and then a Flamethrower, but 2 super effective avalanches take it out pretty quickly. There's also a raid, but I'm pretty sure it's impossible to actually lose here as the Sword and Shield dogs come to help you. So once I'm finished with the raid, I capture Eternatus in a Friend Ball, because, I don't know, I thought it'd be funny if you look at this massive snake dragon hand thingy the size of a skyscraper causing an apocalypse, and your first thought is, I'd bet he'd make a cute friend. Anyhow, it's finally time for the fight with Leon. And for once, I'm not freaking out about the champion fight. More like a low level of cautious optimism. Leon's got a good mix of special and physical attackers, so I won't be able to just set up with Avalugg like I did with Chairman Rose. He's also got coverage moves into my ice types with 4 out of his 5 Pokemon thanks to Steel, Rock, and Fire type moves. This made strategizing for this fight pretty difficult because I wasn't always sure which Pokemon the AI was likely to rotate through. That being said, 3 of Leon's Pokemon are actually weak to Ice-type moves, and I've got strong coverage options with the dual typings on my team. As long as I can get the right party members in at the right time, I'll have the upper hand. And it's the champion fight, so I can be very liberal with my sacrifices into safe switches. Those of you who noticed the item and move combination on Weavile will realize how heavily I'm willing to lean into that idea. Leon's first Pokemon is an Aegislash, and I send in Nubby. I start off with a Protect because I'm not sure if he'll go for the kill with Flash Cannon or just use his signature move. Thankfully, he does use King Shield, so I know he won't be able to use it twice in a row. Expert Belt Earthquake can get the kill, even with Aegislash in shield form. Haxorus gets sent out next, and I'm able to tank a pretty hard Iron Tail and then secure the kill with Avalanche, which has double power when I'm hit with an attack on the same turn. Up next is Dragapult, and it's a special attacker, so I send in my Assault Vest backup. Flamethrower doesn't do much damage, and even Thunderbolt only brings him down to about half health, as another Avalanche gets me the kill. Leon then sends in Rhyperior, which surprised me because I was expecting Rillaboom instead. Rhyperior's rock typing is pretty scary, so I decide to just go for a sack. I send in Nubby, and I have to lose my Mammoth again, as a Stone Edge takes her out. With that sacrifice though, I get the free switch into Thanks, who has the Choice Scarf to outspeed and lands a 4 times effective Energy Ball that kills even despite the solid rock ability. Rillaboom comes out next, but it's a physical attacker, so I swap into Second Savior, who walls it out as I set up with 2 Iron defenses. I'm not really sure why, but Leon kept going for Endeavor as I was setting up, so I just kind of match his health as he gets chip damage from Hail. Once I get the +4 defense though, Body Press knocks out Rillaboom, and it's time for the big guy to come out. Leon sends in his special attacking G-Max Charizard, so I go for a Protect with Savior. I take a lot of damage from the G-Max Wildfire, but I decide to just stay in and stall the Dynamax turns, so on the next turn, Second Savior goes down. I then send in backup, who's only got about half health, but actually tanks a max Rockfall, thanks to the Assault Vest, and does big damage with Liquidation. That being said, backup takes chip damage from Sandstorm and the residual Wildfire damage, so I get my free switch into Apollo as the Dynamax turns end. Apollo can outspeed here, so I use a normal gem boosted Retaliate to take down Charizard and defeat Leon in the most cinematic way possible. And there it is. I managed to defeat Leon and complete my very first playthrough of Pokemon Shield as a hardcore Nuzlocke using only Ice types. I'm going to structure the conclusion for this video a bit differently, because one of the reasons I watch other Nuzlockers on YouTube is to learn about strategies and techniques that I can use to improve my runs. So I'll talk about the game as a whole and then mention some tips or considerations I had while playing through this challenge. I will say that as this was my first real playthrough of the Galar region, I was pleasantly surprised at how much I enjoyed the game. Sword and Shield were released during a time when I really wasn't playing much Pokemon, and I heard a lot of complaints and negativity surrounding the new games. There are definitely some valid complaints when it comes to these games. Pacing was a bit weird, way too many rival fights, and a lot of cutscenes, and some missed opportunities when it comes to the story. More max rates deal with rampaging Dynamax Pokemon could have been cool, teaming up with GM leaders and rivals. One thing I did appreciate about Hop as a rival was how he actually switched up his team quite a bit. I mentioned it before because I thought it was a nice touch. Other stuff that I liked. I thought a lot of the character designs were great. I joked about it a lot in the video, but each character felt pretty unique. Also, the wild area opens up a lot of really interesting opportunities for challenge runs I wouldn't really try in other games. I didn't really farm any of the dens for encounters this run, but expanding movesets with the TRs gave me a good amount of flexibility. And on a similar note, the item selection was awesome. I don't think I've ever really used an Assault Vest or Choice Band before the postgame before. So overall, I liked Gen 8. This was a lot of fun, but playing it with only ice types was kind of a struggle. I ran through almost every ice type available in this game, and I let 10 of them die on me. Ice types are a scary theme to run with. There's a lot of danger in the early game when your Pokemon are super fragile, and a lot of them don't evolve until pretty late in the game. Once I got some evolutions for some bulk and extra typings, the game was a lot less anxiety-inducing, but I still tried to avoid trainers as much as possible, in case they threw a strong fighting or rock type at me. Especially when you're not as familiar with the game like I was, it can definitely pay off to play it safe. Do your research if you're worried about mandatory trainers, and see if you can avoid anyone who might be an issue. Obviously, encounters work a bit differently in this game, but in general, repels are super helpful, especially if it's an area with a lot of scary Pokemon. Anytime I can avoid a Dugtrio or a Wobbuffet, I definitely will. Arena Trap or Shadow Tag will prevent you from running or even switching, and moves like Counter or Mirror Coat can definitely be an issue if you're not prepared for it. Plan for key fights ahead of time. I almost ended my own run at the fight with Kabu because I nearly locked myself out of the Shelter encounter, so plan ahead. That is also the point when I planned out my Lapras encounter on Route 9. Still worth it. In all honesty though, I am glad I didn't rely on the body press strategy too much. Some of the other videos I looked at for research had mentioned it, and people think it's kind of too broken, so it's one of those strategies that I think I won't rely on too much unless it's the only way I can get ahead in the game, like with the fight with Rose. So anyway, those were just some thoughts I had while playing through this game. If you guys have any other tips you think would be helpful, feel free to comment them below. I could definitely use some pointers, especially for some of these newer games. And if you have any questions, please comment those as well, and I'll try to find an answer for you. If you're going to try an Ice-type only challenge of your own, let me know, and best of luck. I hope everyone continues to have a wonderful holiday season, and I'll see you all in the new year. It's the River here. Thank you all so much for watching. Stay safe, and happy holidays.